Let's focus again. This is Wednesday, September 20th, my advanced class. We're going to get into our story, Black Cat. Real quick, speedy intro stuff. We have the football spirit game. It's 9 at 5:30. I'll be there about 6:15. Read the Locker Junkie story for Friday. It's going to be on the quiz. It's pretty much what the quiz is about. Workday tomorrow. You're going to get stuff done. And we also have another story called Boy World. Make sure you have a roll of tape that you can use for my class. You can tape things into your notebook, like quizzes that you do well on. Excuse me. Or whether you lose like papers, you can tape them in there, something like that, make life better. Short story homework number 2. I'm giving it to you a day early to make life easy. Here it is, short story homework number 2. It's not due until Tuesday of next week. And you're going to have to make sure you download Locker Junkie and short story homework number 2. And they're going to connect and be together. Then you have a new option on there, which is option number 4, because you can't do option 3 because I'm not giving you a paper quiz. But option number 4 is the 7 elements, where you get to go through the 7 elements and tell me the character, setting, plot, point of view. There's directions on there, and by now I'm sure you've all learned the wonderful joys of following directions, so I'm not too worried from there. Quick reviewy bits from yesterday. What do we know about, well, let's back up. Point of view for the story is? First person. Do we know the main character's name? No. We don't know his name yet. We just know that. We do know something's going to happen to him tomorrow. He is going to die. Now, why he's going to die, we might be beginning to have suspicions about why he's going to die. But I'm not sure, even with karma, you can just predict karma's going to come tomorrow. I'm not sure that's sort of how karma works. But he does say he's going to die. We find out what kind of person was he growing up.
Good person.
A good person. Why did his friends make fun of him growing up? He loved animals so much. And then he does get married, and how does his wife feel about animals?
Yay!
Yay is a perfect reaction. And then something leads to him making poor choices. Drinking and alcohol. And so he starts going down the path of not good choiceism. And so what kind of alcoholic is he? What kind of choices does he make when The first poor choice he makes is? And of course, the cat, what bad thing did the cat do?
Bite him.
Why did the cat bite him?
Because he cut his arm out.
No.
He bit him
because the cat ran away from him, because the cat was like, "You're crazy and drunk." And he's like, "You don't run from me." And then he grabbed the cat, and the cat was like, "That was why I was running from you." And of course, that's how I imagine you had the conversation with the cat. But the cat gets better and continues on to have a long, long life until the next paragraph. And then in the next paragraph, what does he choose to do?
Kill the cat!
Now, at least he has a really good reason for it. And what's his good reason for it?
Because the cat loved him.
He says, essentially, humans like to make poor choices. You guys like to get on your iPad when you're not supposed to at home, or that you do not do homework when you're supposed to. Humans make poor choices, even though we know we're not supposed to. Mr. Brovicast, getting on my iPad is not the same thing as killing a cat. I know. His choices go a little stronger than yours, but hopefully he's drinking a little more alcohol than you, so that might have a slight change in the effect. Just a little bit. Good. But don't worry, as I've mentioned, more is going to happen. We're only this far in to a story that goes this far, so but wait, there's more. So we're on the first page, third column, about halfway down, where he talks about the fact that he has now done horrible things to this cat. Yes, child?
So did he kill the cat?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He murdered the cat in cold blood like a
He
real
didn't
cat.
put the noose around him and just hang him there?
I mean, he did, but he just left it. Don't worry, more is getting ready to happen. We're not done with Cat on the Road.
I'm sorry to put the cat on and push the cat off.
Right, let's find out. So from there, more fun bits we get to find out. So it says, on the night, that's where we stopped. On the night of the day on which this, so he did it in the morning, by the way, and then he left the cat sitting in this tree outside his house all day, because choices. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cries of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the inferno. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself from then on to despair. So what just happened to him? Karma. And so he gets woken up in the middle of the night, house was on fire. Everything's better now. No, it's not. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect. See, he does not believe in karma between the disaster and the crime. I am just detailing a chain of facts, and I wish not to leave even a possible link imperfect. On the day after the fire, I visited the ruins of my house. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found with a closet wall, not very thick, which stood around the middle of the house, and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plaster had resisted the destruction of the fire, a fact which I attributed to its having been recently spread. About this wall, a dense crowd of people were collected, and many of them seemed to be examining a particular portion of it with eager attention. The words strange, extraordinary, and other similar expressions grabbed my curiosity. I approached and saw, as if imprinted upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was done with an accuracy that was truly marvelous. There was even a rope about the animal's neck. So, he goes back to his house the next day. Whole house is burnt to the ground except for one wall. And this one wall was the one that was right behind where his bed was. And he says it's because he recently put up fresh plaster on it, the stuff that you on the house, so they put holes in it. He says that's probably why it didn't burn. And he comes back to his house, and there's a group of people just standing in the ruins of his house, staring at this wall, going, "Oh my God, look at this wall!" Because apparently, my God is right. What's wrong with the wall? There is an outline of a cat smashed against this wall, and it has the outline of a rope against it. Like someone has perfectly traced this outline of a cat and a rope against this wall that was right above his bed. He goes, kind of creepy, but he has a perfect explanation for it. When I first beheld this ghostly sign, for I could scarcely regard it as anything less, my wonder and my terror were extreme. The cat, I finally remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been immediately filled by the crowd of people, and someone must have cut the animal from the tree and thrown it through an open window into my bedroom. This had probably been done with the idea of waking me from sleep. The falling of other walls had smashed the victim of my cruelty into the substance of the freshly spread plaster, the chemicals of which, the flames and the ammonia from the carcass, had then accomplished the image as I saw it. Although I had found a logical explanation for what I had seen, it did not fail to make a deep impression upon my imagination. For months, I could not rid myself of the specter of the cat. And during this period, there came back into my soul a half-feeling that seemed close to, but was not quite, remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me, among the dreadful places which I now frequently visited, for another pet of the same species and of somewhat similar appearance with which to replace it. So many things have happened, just that little bit right there. So he has a perfectly normal explanation for why there's a smashed impression of a cat against a wall. What's his perfectly normal explanation? Zoe?
So he said somebody grabbed the cat off the tree, threw it in the bedroom to scare him, and then when like the walls collapsed, it like imprinted on the fresh plaster.
And then everything dissolved and burned away, leaving just the impression.
Yes.
Perfect sense, happens all the time. Anytime that you see a house on fire, you immediately look for a cat to throw through a window, and you're like, house is on fire! And you throw a cat in there, you're like, that's how you wake people up. We all know this is a very... We don't get a lot of humor in Poe, but I can only assume this is him trying to be funny, because there's no way that's like, yeah, that makes sense. That's what someone did. They're like, your house is on fire. And you go through the window, and you're like, oh, thank God you threw a cat at. But that's his idea, and it left the impression on me. Now, he says, I feel a little bad about the death of the cat, So he's decided to make things up. So what has he decided to do? It's time to get a new cat. He wants to find one that looks just like the old cat. Because that's what makes things better. When the first cat is gone, you just get a new kitten and go, oh, that other cat, no one even remembers that cat. That was spooky and ghostly and appeared on a wall. Perfectly normal. One night, as I sat, half stupefied, meaning drunk, in a local bar, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object resting upon the head of one of the immense barrels of gin, or rum, which was the main furniture of the place. I've been looking steadily at the top of this barrel for some time, and what now surprised me was the fact that I had not sooner noticed the object there. I approached it and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one, nearly as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every aspect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any part of his body, but this cat had a large splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of its chest. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my attention. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I at once offered to purchase it off the bartender, but he made no claim of it, knew nothing of it, had never even seen it before. When you get older, you'll find out it's very common to just pick up random cats in bars. This is what people do all the time. Okay. You just walk out, oh, bar kitty! You just put it in your pocket and you just walk home. It happened to me many times in my life also. I continued to pet it, and when I prepared to go home, the animal seemed to want to follow me. I allowed it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I went. When it reached the house, it made itself quite comfortable at once, and immediately became a great favorite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. This was just the opposite of what I had anticipated. But I know not how or why it was, I became disgusted by its evident fondness of me. By slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature, a certain sense of shame and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty, preventing me from physically abusing it. I did not, for some weeks, strike or otherwise violently abuse it, but gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with unimaginable loathing and to flee silently from its revolting presence, as from the breath of a plague. Now, I'm sure you're all completely surprised at the turn the story has taken. So he got himself New Kitty. And what's our problem with New Kitty?
New Kitty likes him.
New Kitty likes him. And how does he respond to that? Not yet.
Not yet.
Now, does he respond well to Kitty liking him?
No.
That's where our issues come in. But don't worry, it gets worse.
No.
And then it gets better. And then it gets worse again.
All right.
What?
You're worse and you're better, or are worse?
Yeah, whatever. It's good. It's the same thing. What added, no doubt, to my hatred of the beast was the discovery on the morning after I brought it home that, like Pluto, it also had lost one of its eyes. This circumstance, however, only endeared it to my wife, who possessed that feeling towards animals which had once been my distinguishing trait and the source of many of my simplest and purest pleasures. See, it's almost just like the previous kitty. With my hatred for this cat, however, its attraction towards me seemed to increase. It followed my footsteps with an insistence that would be difficult to make the reader comprehend. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath the chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome purring. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly trip me up, or fastening its long and sharp claws in my clothes, climb in this manner to my chest. At such times, although I wanted to destroy it with a single blow, I was still stopped from doing so, partly by a memory of my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it at once, by my absolute fright of the beast.
Oh, wow.
This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil. Oh, pause real quick. There is one difference between Pluto and this cat. What was the one difference he mentioned? That's going to come back in a moment. I know. I was excited.
I didn't think of that.
That's why in the hallway this morning I complimented your shirt. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, and yet I should be at a loss at how otherwise to define it. I'm almost ashamed to own, yes, even in my current felon's cell. So we find out, where is he right now?
Prison.
He's in prison. In my current felon's cell, I'm still ashamed to own that the terror and horror with which the animal inspired me have been heightened to a level be almost impossible to think of. My wife had called my attention more than once to the shape of the mark of white hair, and which was the only visible difference between the strange beast and the one I had destroyed. The reader will remember that this mark, although large, had been originally quite indefinite, but by slow degrees nearly unnoticeable, and which for a long time my brain struggled to reject as simply imagination, its outline had taken on a more definite shape. It was now the depiction of an object that I shuddered to name, and for this above all I loathed, dreaded, and would have rid myself of the monster had I dared. It was now, I say, the image of a ghastly thing, of the gallows. O mournful and terrible engine of horror and crime, of agony and of death. If you don't know what gallows are, that does not make much sense to you. What are gallows?
It's where they hang people.
The place where you hang people. So the kitty's white shape on his chest, that started to look just like that.
Like Hangman.
Like Hangman. By the way, why would this begin to spook him? He hung the Ermagerd.
Just like this.
So that's why he's getting all creeped out by Mr. Kitty.
Back at him and torturing him harder.
It's almost like the cat's going to start trying to drive him insane. And now was I indeed miserable beyond mere humanity would allow. Alas, neither by day nor by night knew I the blessing of sleep anymore. During the former, the creature left me no moment alone, and in the latter, I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face, and its vast weight a living nightmare that I had no power to shake off, resting eternally upon my heart. Beneath the pressure of torments such as these, the frail remains of the good that was within me gave way. Evil thoughts became my only comforts, the darkest and most evil of thoughts. The moodiness of my usual attitude increased into a hatred of all living things and of all mankind, and my uncomplaining wife was the most usual and the most patient of sufferers of these outbursts. One day, she accompanied me upon some household errand into the basement of the old building which our poverty forced us to live in. The cat followed me down the steep stairs and, nearly tripping me, infuriated me into madness. Lifting a nearby axe and forgetting in my wrath the childish dread which had so far stopped me, I aimed to blow at the animal, which of course would have proved instantly fatal had it gone as I wished. But this blow was stopped by the hand of my wife. Aggravated by the interference into a blinding rage, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain.
Oh my God!
She fell dead on the spot. Without even a groan. We know he has issues. Don't worry. We have more. Wow. If you guys get worked up on this story, we haven't even gotten to like my fun stories coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yay,
Jeff!
This is the side of the fight.
This hideous murder accomplished, I set about the task of concealing the body, because that's what you do when you kill your wife. You immediately start hiding it, because choices, right? I knew that I could not remove it from the house, either by day or by night, without the risk of being seen by the neighbors. Many ideas entered my mind. At one period, I thought of cutting the corpse into tiny pieces and destroying them by fire. We've all had this thought. At another, I resolved to dig a grave in the floor of the basement. Again, I thought about tossing it in the well in the backyard. And this is my favorite one, I even considered packing it in a box as if it were a present and getting the postman to take it away from the house. Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better method than either of those. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are thought to have walled up their victims. For a purpose such as this, the basement was well tailored. Its walls were loosely constructed and had lately been plastered throughout with a rough plaster, which the constant dampness of the basement had prevented from hardening. Moreover, in one of the walls was a hollow area, caused by a false chimney or fireplace that had been filled up and made to resemble the rest of the basement. I made no doubt that I could readily remove the bricks in this part, insert her corpse, and wall up the hole as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. And in this calculation, I was not wrong. With a crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully placed the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while, with little trouble, I relaid the bricks and walls that had originally stood. Having bought mortar, sand, and hair, that's what you used to plaster walls in the old days, I prepared a new plaster, which could not be distinguished from the old. And with this, I very carefully went over my fresh brickwork. When I had finished, I felt sure that it was perfect. The wall did not have the slightest appearance of having been broken. The rubbish on the floor was picked up with care. I looked around triumphantly and said to myself, "Here at least, then, my work has not been in vain." He's proud of himself. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much misery, for I had at length firmly resolved to put it to death. Had I been able to meet with it at the moment, there could have been no doubt of its fate. But it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger, and had decided to hide because of my present mood. It is impossible to describe the deep and blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature created in me. It did not come out again that night, and thus, for one night at least, since its introduction into the house, I soundly and calmly slept. Yes, I slept, even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again, I breathed as a free man. The monster, in terror, had fled the house forever. I should behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me very little. Some investigation into my wife's disappearance had been made, but these had been readily answered. Even a search for her had occurred, but of course nothing was to be discovered. I looked upon my future freedom as entirely secured. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, the police came, very unexpectedly, into the house, and again made a thorough investigation of the house. I felt safe, however, in knowing they would never discover my place of concealment. The officers asked me to accompany them in their search. They left no nook or corner unexplored. At length, for the third or fourth time, they descended into the basement. I didn't quiver a muscle. My heart beat as calmly as that of one who sleeps in innocence. I walked the basement from end to end. I folded my arms upon my chest, roamed easily to and fro. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to leave. The excitement in my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say but one word, so I could secretly gloat and yet also convince them of my guiltlessness. "Gentlemen," I said at last, as the cops climbed the steps, "I am happy to have dispelled your suspicions. I wish you all good health. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house." In the rabid desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew I uttered it all. "I may say an excellently constructed house. These walls—" "Are you going already, gentlemen? These walls are solidly put together." And here, through the mere act of daring, I knocked heavily with a cane, which I held in my hand, upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of my wife. but may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the evil beast. No sooner had the echoes of my blows sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb, by a cry at first muffled and broken, like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, continuous scream, utterly abnormal and inhuman, a howl, a wailing shriek, half of horror, half of triumph, such as might have arisen only out of a nightmare, conjointly from the throats of the cursed in their agony, and of the demons that exult in their eternal torture. So he bangs on the wall starts screaming. What's behind the wall?
The
His dead wife. As to my own thoughts, it is silly to speak of them. Swooning, I staggered to the opposite wall. For one instant, the policemen upon the stairs remained motionless, frozen by their terror and awe. In the next, a dozen strong arms were tearing at the wall. It fell quickly. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the crowd. Upon the corpse's head, with its gaping red mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose acts had seduced me into murder, and whose powerful voice will send me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb.
So the cat was the wife.
He chose the wrong part, didn't he?
No.
That was a wife.
The cat snuck in there when he was walling up his wife and hid, and then just stood on top of the wife, waiting until the right moment. And when he banged on the wall,
That's a really good picture, Mr. Brand.
right? Pretty on point. Got the cops. Got the he banging up the cane on there, stuff like that. And so he ends up basically turning himself in on accident. See, it all ends okay because what's going to happen to him tomorrow? And of course, back then, how do they execute people? By hanging you. And so that's where it all comes back around. I know the murder of his wife, but she apparently had to die for karma to take the full effect. It was a small sacrifice to make. Well done.